sisters, and we're born and brought up in New York. My mother's from Puerto Rico. My father was born in the Dominican Republic from a Spanish father and a Puerto Rican mother. And he spent most of his childhood in Santo Domingo, and in high school he immigrated to Puerto Rico.
And we grew up in South Bronx projects, and a lot of our education was in New York City, but we also went to school in Puerto Rico. Alma went to junior high school, and I went to part of my high school in Puerto Rico, and our first master's degree was a consortium between the University of Puerto Rico and CUNY, and so we've had the experience of having education in Puerto Rico and in New York City. It's a different world now.
And Puerto Rico is a different place from when we were children. Puerto
Yes.
Rico is very, very, with technology and telephones and TV. Puerto Rico is as modern as New York, if not even more. So I think the gap between what Puerto Rico was and what New York was there's no gap. It's very fluid. I get to Puerto Rico, I feel I'm at home. It's it's my second home. It's not my first home. It's my second home. And but when we were kids, it was very different. We were out in the woods. We went to live out in the country. And I remember the first, I was going to a school in a small town up in the mountains, and a cow came into the classroom. And a New Yorker kid who, I never saw a cow except in a picture, to have that cow come into your classroom was like a shock. That would not happen now in Puerto Rico. Can't find too many more cows. But it's just a very different world. Well, I think it's important because the Puerto Rican was really the first, at least in the East Coast. And we basically set the path and paved the road for the rest of the Latinos behind us. When we think of a lot of programs that we have now, a lot of services, the Puerto Rican fought for these services. These services were not given to us. We fought for these services. When we talk about ethnic studies in higher ed, those ethnic studies came about because students like myself fought for those ethnic studies. There's students who were arrested. There were students who closed down offices of the president in order to get these services. You had the young lords who took over City College. And we were the ones who did this. So when other Latinos come in and they assume or they take for granted that their kid could choose either a bilingual program or an ESL program, that they have free lunch, that they have all of these amenities. A lot of these things came from, and all of these things came from the civil rights movement. So it's not only that we worked in a vacuum. This came from movements in the 60s, and we were the pioneers. And that's why it has to be told, because we really made a mark in Latino history, and we continue to.
My answer is more in terms of, and I think what Alma said is absolutely true. I would answer that more from a psychologist's point of view. And what we are learning is that a lot of the work done by a lot of the researchers in ethnic identity formation, basically what we want in counseling, the number one thing is to have people like who they are. part of what adolescents go through is really forming an identity, and part of that is accepting and really being comfortable with who they are. And you really can't be comfortable with who you are unless you know who you are, and
like who you are,
and like who you are, and appreciate who you are. And that process is a process that sometimes takes a long time. It's much faster and clearer when you're able to learn about yourself and have an opportunity to do that. When I grew up, everybody was white. God was white, Santa Claus was white, even Snow White was white. And they were mainly men. But it's great nowadays to have role models, you know, and you can turn on the television. At one point, other than Ricky Ricardo, there was no Latino out there that you could identify with. I'm still waiting for more Latino situation comedies, but.
Well, we talk about in the book with my daughter was going to the Puerto Rican Day Parade, and one of her close friends came, and she's Egyptian, and she was dressed up with flags all over her. She had a flag on her head. She had a
Puerto Rican flag.
Yeah, she had a shirt with a flag. She had pants that looked like a flag. And I looked at her. I said, "You're not Puerto Rican." She says, "No, but you know." And my daughter said, "Yeah, but everybody wants to be Puerto Rican." And Angie happened to be in my house, and we looked at one another, and we knew instantly. You know, we looked at one another. That was not the case when we were kids. We didn't want to be Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
Because it was so negative to be Puerto Rican, and this is why the story has to be told. Well, I think that depending on where we lived, and we talk about this in the book, while we lived in the projects, we were almost insulated from racism. We were insulated from being different. Once we moved out of the projects and we went to predominantly white schools, then that's where we were really hit with the fact that we were different, that we were not like everyone else, we were not good enough, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's ironic, because I think very often parents want to bring their children to better neighborhoods or get them into very strong schools, but you pay a price. And I think in some ways that was very hurtful in terms of my self-esteem. And really, that was I think the premise of the book. Then who are we? You know, all of a sudden you're made to feel different, and trying to form an identity of who you are. And that's the term Nuyorican, because that's ultimately the identity that we took on.
I think we're in a much it's a more upbeat story because we triumphed. We are two sisters who were born in poverty, and even though it was a hard struggle, we have both attained doctorates, and that's a very unusual mix for where we came from.
I think that's the question that everybody always asks. How come two, young Puerto Rican girls from the South Bronx projects, how did you end up both becoming faculty members? And how did you get PhDs? So really, the book starts with trying to answer that question. What were some of the variables and factors that perhaps, made a difference in our lives? Because many of the young Puerto Ricans that we grew up with didn't fare as well. Many did, but many didn't. So what was it? And I think we got a good stab at it, but who knows?